In your health headlines, pediatricians are calling for stricter regulations to prevent lead poisoning in children, saying the U.S. is not doing enough to stop it. And while a new report found that blood lead levels declined nationally across the country, 3% of children have blood levels that the CDC considers concerning. Tonight, Dr. Mitchel Goldman, Dr. G from UCSD, is here now to talk about all this. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Kathleen.
Well, we have heard so much about lead poisoning with the high-profile water crisis in Flint, Michigan. How is it that children across the U.S. are getting these elevated lead levels?
Well, in Michigan and especially East Coast areas, it's where tap water is coming through leaden pipes. And those are pipes that usually were put down years and years ago, so back in the 30s and 40s. But more commonly here in California, it's from paint. And you know, paint really didn't have to not have lead in it until the 1970s. And so homes that have been painted over and over, that were built in the 40s and 30s and 50s, really have a problem with lead paint. And it's so that when the kids eat the paint, or if you're sort of sanding off the paint in order to repaint it, the dust is what actually gives you lead poisoning.
And what are the real dangers of lead poisoning? What does it do specifically?
You know, especially to kids, it impairs memory and development. And so kids will be a little slower. They have a little more attention deficit disorders. The way you can actually see if your kid is having a lead poisoning problem isn't easy. It's just that they're not doing as well in school, and maybe they're not feeling as well, not eating as much. But you know, lead in adults is also being linked to decreased memory loss and other stuff that happens when we're getting older. So it's very difficult to figure out what is just getting older and what is lead poisoning.
So let's look at some of the signs and symptoms that you actually sent us a list, and we'll put this up for our viewers. And if you can run through those and explain to us what you mean.
Yeah, well, you know, lead is basically found especially in paint, but sometimes in the soil and then through the pipes. But also, especially here in San Diego, there's a number of candies that are coming from Mexico where not the candy, but the wrappers that the candy is in has actually lead in it. It's in the colorings of the wrapping. And when you're redoing your home, especially if you're sanding down walls and things, you can actually get that dust from the old lead in paint. Now, if you have toys or jewelry that have been passed down from generation to generation in old types of plastics, those also will contain lead in them.
So what should parents do then if they think their child may have been exposed to lead?
You know, the easiest thing to do, and it's actually a state regulation, is to have a blood test for lead, because that's the only way you can really tell. And here in California and nationwide, most children are required to have a blood test that is very simple to do to see if you have too much lead in your system.
All right, Dr. G, you heard it here. Ask your pediatricians, and thank you so much for your insight today.
Great to be here, Kathleen.